registered Holsteins. I milked a registered Holstein herd in Wisconsin for a number of years. And so that's the focus I've got. I'm going to talk a little bit about technology in general sense. I'm not here to try and sell you on anything, but I think technology is going to impact all of us. Well, I know it's going to impact all of us, and the dairy industry in particular. So as I was preparing this presentation, what do you talk about? So I plagiarized slides from everywhere I can get them. And this is a slide set that was provided at the High Plains Dairy Conference in Texas earlier this year. But it really signified to me the impact that the dairy industry has on each individual state's economy, particularly a state that's near and dear to me, Wisconsin, $36,000 for each individual cow and the economic impact that she provides. So that as I dug a little further, what about the evergreen state? And I got that right, it's the evergreen state, correct? All right. So 5.2 billion in economic activity, a lot of economic activity here in Washington. Of course, apples is a big deal, but dairy's right there. And as was noted, I'm from a small town in Wisconsin, perhaps you've heard of it, Fort Atkinson, the home of Horace Dairyman, National Ag Supply Company, their headquarters. James Way Industries was there, which was the father of J-Star, which was the father of Digistar, which is probably some other iteration now. When I was a kid growing up, I thought this is the center of the dairy world. And then through all my activities, I got pretty involved in registered Holsteins. And perhaps you've heard of Crescent Beauty Farms. Their home, they were a world famous registered Holstein herd in Fort Atkinson, Wisconsin, really world famous. And I got involved with them as well, and they really sparked my interest in registered cattle. I used to pore over the Holstein world. You probably remember getting that magazine yourselves. And I looked at the great cows from the state of Washington, and I thought to myself, someday, if I could ever buy a dairy in the state of Washington, I'd have the world by the tail. So as far as I'm concerned, you guys are all the cream of the crop. Never quite made it, don't think I'll make it at this point, but that's my view of the state of Washington. It's always been the apple of my eye. So the economic drivers for the state, what's closer to home? What's in your pens? To me, genomic technology was the first real state-of-the-art technology that impacted the dairy industry. So we could look under the skin of those animals and see what they had. And I don't know if any of you are making use of this. If you breed AI, you are. But you all got animals in your pens that could have some genomically or genetically impact your herds. So I don't necessarily go to USDA for all my information, but they tend to be pretty good with their predictions. And they predict that the genetic super cow has a value of almost $6,000 over the average herd mate. So do you all have that cow in your pen? Maybe, maybe not, but you all have a best cow. I don't care what color she is, whether she's crossbred, you all have a best cow. Do you know who she is? Do you know how to find her? And then what we're going to talk about throughout this afternoon is, do you know how to get the best out of her, get the most out of her? But I guarantee you all have one of these. You all have a super cow. So a little bit more about what's in your pens. Yeah, the power of poop. That's supposed to be a joke, folks. You can laugh. It's okay. So it's really amazing to me the number of digesters that are going in around the country, and just the amount of value that manure brings. And don't think for a minute that it's just about manure. Excuse me. So I happen to know there are companies in the industry, John Deere for one, they're thinking in long term about how do we who compiles all this information? So they're interested in not only the manure, but then what field it goes on, what seed is planted there, the result of the harvested crop, how that crop ensiles and then in the bunker, and then how it performs when fed, and then how the cow responds to that, and how she reproduces because of that, and then what goes back into the pen and then goes back in the manure pit. So that whole circle is being worked on, how to extract data, how to hold that information. That's all coming. It's all going to be part of our lives here in the near future. So all this technology that's swirling around, how do we make use of it? It's pretty daunting, if you ask me. I see these movies about artificial intelligence, and you've got robots killing people, and it just seems crazy. It also seems really expensive. How many of you paid the same for your cell phone that you have now as the very first one you bought? Probably not. Probably not. So that has to be factored into it as well. But it also creates opportunity. Who thought manure was going to be worth what it's worth now? And I'm hearing 120 to 150 bucks a cow. That's a lot of money. Just a little story. There's a dairy in Michigan that was a very large dairy that was looking at installing robots. Well, as they did their predictions and cost analysis and income analysis, the value of the manure was actually more valuable than the milk. Now, is that good or bad? I don't know. You have to answer that, but it's to me, it's a tremendous opportunity. So systems currently in use on farms, herd management software, feed management, you can read that. I don't need to read them all for you. But I dare say I don't go to a dairy anymore that isn't using at least one of these, if not multiple of these systems. And I would say maybe 15 to 20 years ago, very few used any of these systems. So technology is slowly creeping in. The question is, how fast is the pace going to be? So why do we use them? Okay, I think there's probably as many reasons as there are people in this room. I hear a lot of, the first response, of course I work for Lely. I'm going to try and keep Lely out of this as much as I can, but understand that's my frame of reference. So the first thing that I hear when I talk to producers that have recently purchased a system, and my job is to help them through that transition. I'm going to reduce labor. I'm going to reduce labor. But then when you go back a year or two later, that is not their focus at all. They may have reduced labor, they maybe haven't, but they all talk about cow performance. That's really what this comes down to. So compliance issues, return on investment, and also the engagement of labor. We got a couple of labor guys over here. I'm picking on the lawyers again. But this is really an opportunity to find the best people you've got. Do they engage with this technology? And do they want to learn? And quite often you find that. So what kind of information are you going to get? You're going to get computed data. This is a Lely report that just gives milk, fat, and protein ratio. Pretty simple. Nutritionists look at this stuff a lot. It's part of an animal health computation, which, here's another Lely report. This is more of a customized data. A lot of deep algorithms behind this. But it's just the beginning of algorithmic information. Tells us how sick a cow might be, why she's sick, and then equally as important is the information you input back into the system. It's just like a silo. Junk in is junk out, good in is good out. So questions that you should ask when you're thinking about technology. Who owns the data? Now, I don't know any company that's going to say, I own your data. Nobody's going to say that. But they also, Lely and others, need your data to be able to create these customized and algorithmic reports. There's no way around that. Can an individual dairy producer do that? Boy, it's going to take an awful lot of cows to get good information out. But it's a question that needs to be asked and needs to be discussed. Can I manage who has access? Okay, becoming very important. Anybody ever been scammed before, spammed, hit with whatever? I mean, it happens every day. Where's the data stored? Again, what's the value? And can I incorporate this? Are there API data transfers with other programs? Other questions? What kind of support does the technology provide? Is it functionally useful? Okay, there's all kinds of gee whiz information out there. And when you transition, at least to robotic milking, which is my area, of course, it's like, we say it's like eating the elephant. You do it one bite at a time. It's also like drinking from the fire hose. You're just going to get overwhelmed with data, and you've got to work with people who are going to support you and make sure you're getting the most useful information. What is that implementation process? I know at the company I work for, we try to have a very systematic approach to transitioning people. I'm not saying we do it perfectly all the time, but we do try. And don't underestimate the time and commitment it's going to take from you to go through that implementation. Again, what are the costs and what are hardware requirements? Okay, Microsoft is making changes every day, and that impacts every piece of software that you have on your dairy. And so hardware is going to need to be changed. How often does it need to be changed? What are the costs? Those all need to be considered. So this, to me, is the most interesting thing. As I said, talking with producers when they're making that transition, a lot of them talk about milking cows. Hey, I can put a robot in, and instead of 3 times a day, I can average 3.2 or 3.3. It's really not about milking cows. It's about a system of management. That's really what you have to consider. And whether it's feeding, whether it's milking, it's how you manage those cows. And that's going to fundamentally change in the next few years, I believe. So is all this data cloud-based? What is the integration? Adequate internet speed. Maybe up here where it's a little bit more populated, you've got great internet, but some of the places I get to in Texas and Idaho, it's not so great. So that is needs to be strongly considered. And then I mentioned employees a lot, quite often here, and I'm going to continue to do that. What's the employee engagement? How can you engage those employees? Because you're going to have them. You will have employees. You're not going to get rid of everybody. Those robots or those feeders, they need to be maintained. You don't run a combine or a chopper out in the field without checking all the lubricants and the air pressure. Same thing with a robot. It's a machine. And you're going to have a whole new set of SOPs. There's no question about that. So again, think systems, not specific tasks. So how do you succeed after implementation? You got to trust the information. I hear a lot of, there's no way that could be. There's no way. There's no way. Well, it is. You got to trust the sensors, trust the information you're getting. You got to maintain that equipment, what I just spoke of. There's a daily maintenance routine for a robot. I don't care what color it is, but it has to be done. You've also got to manage your data, and you've got to engage the staff. Again, we're back to people. These are people systems. And we have to create a culture where the people want to work with these systems. It's quite interesting to me when we do startups. We call it a startup, when you're getting the cows used to the robot and the people used to the robot. I always find it pretty fascinating, obviously a lot of Hispanic labor out there. Which one of the Hispanic workers really stays and wants to be engaged, and which ones run? And don't get rid of the guy who's being engaged. think twice about the guy who ran. But that guy that's interested is going to be a key person for you. And then again, understand the ongoing costs. So this next slide, you probably didn't think you were going to have a test today, but this gives me a chance to show this video and take a break.
This is a test of selective attention. Count how many times the players wearing white pass the basketball. How many passes did you count? The correct answer is 15 passes. But did you see the gorilla?
Yes.
This video is from research by Daniel Simons and Christopher Chabris and is...
Okay, I want truthful answers. During the first round, before the narrator, who saw the gorilla? It's pretty good. Okay, who saw it after the narrator? Who saw the gorilla after the narrator? Yeah, the first time I saw this, I missed it completely. Didn't see it till the narrator said it was there. So why do I show that? I mean, it's a nice little break for me to get a drink of water, but it's really about the cognitive dissonance that can be created with robots and all the data that's coming at you. You got to trust the information, trust what you see. So you don't want to create cognitive bias. And I'll give you a minute to check. That's two completely different cows, right? Now I'll let you check the spots. They're the same cow. It's the same cow. Just got to beware of the bias. Okay, before I go to the next slide, a little disclaimer.